I'm Flavia Zimmermann from the Australian Institute for International Affairs in Western Australia, and today we have with us Professor James Piscatori from the Australian National University. Today we are going to be discussing some issues on Muslim states and the international order. Good to have you first.
Thanks
Professor.
very much for asking me. Thank you.
Could you please, Professor Piscatori, give us an overview of Muslim norms and practices and their compatibility with the Westphalian international order?
Well, it's one of those great debates that most people say that they're not compatible, but I think they are, by and large. One can always argue, and there's often a great emphasis put on, for example, jihad, and the argument is that this is a rejection of the Westphalian system. But I think if you take up the broader picture, we've seen over time, and really from throughout the centuries, an accommodation of Muslim political entities, we now call them states, with the prevailing rules of international order. So, for example, just to give one example, Islam puts a great emphasis on upholding contracts, so that's absolutely consistent with the idea of upholding treaties and international relations. So I'd say by and large that they are compatible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Professor Piscatori. And could you please explain the concept of Ummah and how it impacts the international order?
Yeah, it's a good question because the Ummah is one of those ideas that everybody invokes. So broadly speaking, it really means the pan-Islamic community. So the Quran, for example, says that Muslims belong to one community, and that, in a sense, therefore refers to the solidarity of Muslims, the sharing of the beliefs, but also the idea that there is a kind of a kinship because of that common belief. And I think that's an important idea, and we can see it today in the sense that Muslims anywhere and everywhere would feel that they belong together in one community. What is not the case, I think, is when we assume that that would create a one state. There's no, I think, realistic possibility of a sort of pan-Islamic state, but it doesn't mean that there isn't political significance to the feelings of solidarity and kinship.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Professor Piscatori. And in your opinion, how flexible and adaptable are Muslim states to the international order?
Oh, I think very much. I mean, I think, again, we have to juxtapose the kind of conventional view of this, which is that we sometimes overplay the problems. So, for example, when we had the Iranian Revolution and there was the hostage-taking of the Americans, there was a common view which was that this was a rejection of the international order. Iran would be very different in terms of not playing by the rules. But in fact, what we've seen over time is that everybody has to play by the rules in order to be able to get along. So self-interest, in a way, national interest, dictates that you have to play by the rules.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, thank you. Could you please give us some remarks on Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations theory and how it might have impacted the Muslim world and still impacts it today?
Yeah, this is, of course, this has been so controversial. And it was a kind of a sensational argument that international relations is not just what I said. It wasn't organized by national interests, etc. It was organized by cultural factors. And not only that, but there were sort of built-in cultural antagonisms. And of course, the main one was meant to be the conflict between Islam and the West. Now, since we've had the rise of the Islamic State and since we had September 11th, many people will argue, some people will argue, that that's a confirmation of the Huntington quite negative assessment. I think that's wrong. That's one-sided. Culture is important. Religion is important. But we also have the functioning rules of the system. We also have all other kinds of evidence which suggests that states are able to work together across cultural zones. And we see that every day. And in fact, the entire, just for a moment, we just reflect on the entire phenomenon of globalization is dependent on the argument of interconnection. Mm-hmm. So the idea that we're separated into conflicting cultural zones, I think, is just an exaggeration.
Mm-hmm. And do you think also that this very radical view on cultural perspectives that Samuel Huntington took on the Clash of Civilizations, whether it influences the way the Muslim world has been seeing, let's say, the Iraqi war and perceptions that the West has on the Iraqi war?
Yes, I think that's true. I mean, I think very often it does filter into people's way of thinking of it on our side as well as the other. So it kind of reinforces these kind of easy but essentially simplistic stereotypes of the way we approach it. So, oh, well, they're very different, and that we're going to be in sort of conflict with them. But I failed to answer your earlier question, which was, has it any impact on Muslims in a sense? And I think, yes, in a way, because, for example, Islamic State, etc., have argued that, in a way, Huntington is right. They have argued that what we've seen is we are in a clash of civilizations. But again, that is a very extreme and exaggerated view on the Islamic side, just as much as I think the view of the natural antipathy between Islam and the West is exaggerated on the Western side.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Professor Piscatori, and a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much for asking.
For further information, please visit our website.